Okay, this is part two of is George Zimmerman guilty or innocent? So he said he was still on the phone to the non-emergency police. They said, "Do you see him?" And they said, "No." He said he'd go get the address if he walked in between the buildings. He walked in between the buildings, still didn't see anybody. Looked in between the other two buildings, still didn't see anybody. Came to the other side of the street, then saw an address, and they still asked, "Do you see him?" And they said no. Um, they said, "Well, do you still want the police to come out?" And he said, "Yes." And they said, "What address do you want to meet me at?" And he said, "Well, instead of meeting the address, can they meet me back at my truck and I'll walk back to the truck?" And they said, "Yes." So he started to walk back to his truck, looked in between the two other sets of buildings where it was very dark, um, and didn't see anybody. As he started to pass that sidewalk, he heard a noise to the left of him, and Trayvon Martin came out, said something to, "You're looking for trouble? Do you want some trouble?" Or, and some expletives, or whatever. Um, and then George Zimmerman reached to his pocket to get his cell phone because he had got off the line with the police at the time, and was going to call 911. And that's when he said that Trayvon Martin came right up to him and punched him right in the face, knocking him to the ground, and where his body was completely laying in the grass and his head was hanging over the sidewalk. And you see, this is a picture that was in the police car after he was arrested, and you can see his nose is really bad. There's no, blood coming out of it. He saw a doctor the next day. They said they didn't take X-rays, but they said it was possibly broken. But there's not much they do to broken noses nowadays. You can see the injuries on the back of his head. He said after he fell to the ground, Trayvon Martin did what some people call MMA style, jumped on top of him, like straddling him, began to punch him on the side of the face, on each side. He said, like wailing on him, grabbed his head and was smashing into this concrete. He said from the blows that he was taken from the back of the head and being punched, he started feeling woozy, thought he was going to lose consciousness. He said he was yelling for help over and over again. He said he even saw somebody turn on their porch light. He said, "Hey, can you help me?" And the person didn't want to intervene, but said he was calling the police, and he said he already called police. And he said then he was trying to squirm on the wet grass to try to get away. He couldn't, and he said when he lifted up his right arm, that's when his pistol that was in a holster said it became that it could be seen. He said Trayvon Martin seemed to him that he reached towards it. That's when he grabbed the pistol. George Zimmerman did, put it not all the way to his chest, but aimed it at his chest, shot him once. He said Trayvon Martin kind of stood up a little bit, half stood up, half still, kind of crouching over him, put his hands up and said, "You got me, man," and then fell back, and then died, very, very quickly. Now, they called a witness that lived right near there that could see, but see, it was so dark, it was pitch black, that he couldn't see, the actual people, but he said he could see colors of actually what the people were wearing. And when he described the colors were of the same colors that would match the clothes of Trayvon Martin, being the one who was on top of George Zimmerman, and nobody really has disputed that whatsoever. There was the only marks they said was on Trayvon Martin was the gunshot to his chest, the one gunshot, and then some marks on his knuckles, which be most likely consistent from punching somebody, and so there was no signs of Trayvon Martin being punched or head slammed against the ground, and there is there's no they're not contesting that George Zimmerman didn't shoot him. They're not contesting that at all. They're just saying that it was self-defense. Now, in Florida, you have stand your ground law, which his lawyers tried to use, but they said it didn't apply. But also, you have a right to defend yourself. And in Florida, you have the right to defend yourself, and it doesn't have to be that you're going to be in danger of your life. It just has to be that that you're going to have some great bodily harm, and you can defend yourself anyway, including shooting them too as well. And so, just my opinion, real quick, is I think George Zimmerman should be found not guilty. And there's other things that I don't want to make this any longer. There's two parts to it, but I believe that that Trayvon Martin, not a bad kid. There's pictures that are aren't allowed in court, but it shows him possibly smoking marijuana. He's in a picture with a gun and things like that. But that doesn't have anything to do with this case. But I think Trayvon Martin possibly maybe was it was dark, it was rainy. I don't know how many times he had been to that apartment. I think like I said, I think it was where his father's fiance was living, and he was staying the night there, or I don't know if he was, but I thought maybe it seemed like he was confused on where the buildings were, and where the unit was that his father's fiance stayed at. And so I think that's why he looked kind of suspicious, because he was trying to look for it. Now, they told him not to follow him, and he did stop following him. He was looking for an address. And then Trayvon Martin, of course, saw George Zimmerman. Of course, it seemed like George Zimmerman is following him, and possibly going to jack him. He doesn't know who George Zimmerman is, and so he reacted like some people would do, and he really should have called the police, and he was on the phone to a girl, and that girl testified, and she wasn't believable at all. She was very rude and nasty, and her testimony was not believable at all. And so Trayvon Martin, I think, had enough of whoever this guy was coming at him, and then took it upon himself to give him a beat down. And a lot of people would have done that too as well. And this was the girl that he was on the phone with. It was not believable at all. George Martin was screaming for help, 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 and people trying to say it was Trayvon Martin. But if somebody who is beating somebody who's actually giving the beating on top of somebody is not going to be yelling for help. And it wasn't that Trayvon Martin was on the bottom, because there's no proof that he was on the bottom, because when they did the test on his shirt where the gun was, they said the shirt was way down away from him, and it wasn't, if you were sitting straight up or standing straight up or laying on the ground, your shirt or your sweatshirt would be all up against your body. They said his shirt was a couple inches away from his chest when he was shot, and the gun wasn't completely pushed up into his chest. So it shows that he was leaning forward, which is consistent with somebody being on top of somebody, leaning forward and punching them and smashing their head against the ground. And that's the the injuries that shows George Martin. There I go, George Zimmerman. Sorry about that. So my opinion is, it has changed from when I originally heard about this and seeing what the prosecution had brought forth, that George Zimmerman should be found not guilty for reason that he was, protecting himself, and did what he had to do to. He thought he was being attacked and was in fear for his safety. But it's still a tragedy. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I know this is long, 2 parts. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you agree with me. Also, if you disagree, be nice. Don't, I'm not a racist or anything like that. I'm just going by with the facts that I saw, and and we can debate about it if you'd like. Give me a thumbs up if you do agree with me, and also to the people who live in the area, if they do find George Zimmerman not guilty, don't go crazy. Let's not have riots and things like that. Just let calmer heads prevail, and it is a tragedy, and it should have never happened, but it did, and we'll find out in a couple of weeks what the verdict is. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.